Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. There's only one way to describe Karine Jean-Pierre, Jen Psaki's new replacement as the White House press secretary. Mrs. Karine Jean-Pierre is like a deer caught in the headlights. I mean, like I've been saying forever, folks, being the press secretary is hard enough. Being Joe Biden's press secretary is on another level of difficulty entirely. Jen Psaki was relatively talented at being dishonest. I mean, she wasn't the most impressive figure I've ever seen, but for the most part, she had an extremely hard job to do, and she did okay. Karine Jean-Pierre is just not handling it well. It's moment after moment after moment where she either walks straight into a trap, she contradicts herself, or in this case, she stutters and stumbles all over herself, has absolutely no idea how to respond to this very clear, very simple question, and just continues to make a fool out of herself, and of course, by extension, continues to make a fool of the Biden White House, even more than it already is and already has. And that's the thing, folks, it's tough to be a Democrat. When you're a left-winger or you're a Democrat, and you are confronted with the hypocrisies of your own rhetoric and ideology, you have to jump through hoops and do mental gymnastics in order to justify your stances, because clearly you won't be able to do it with facts, data, and statistics. And that is exactly what happened here. Karine Jean-Pierre, once again looking like a deer caught in the headlights when confronted by Peter Doocy. Let me show you guys exactly what's going on here. Let's continue to expose this White House, but before we get into any of it, please make sure to leave a like, a comment, subscribe, share the video as much as possible, and with that out of the way, let's roll the tape. Alright folks, so we don't really need much context, just take a look at this little interaction right over here.
What law could anybody, president or anybody else, propose that would guarantee that somebody who really wants to get their hands on a gun can?
Well, they're having negotiations right now to talk through what the options are. Look, I mentioned the red flags, right? Red flag laws. If enacted, that actually we have seen across the country in different states where it has been helpful. But look, we are going to give them some space to see what they come up with. The president, the most important thing here is the president wants Congress to take action and to act.
But, okay, you got Chicago, for example. They already have plenty of very strict gun laws, some of the strictest in the country. 47 people shot there over the Memorial Day weekend. 9 of them died. So which law would have prevented any of that?
All right, well,
do we think that all these people in Chicago who are shooting each other are legally buying their guns?
so here's a couple of examples for you. I was just talking about the red flags law. There are some examples here of how they've prevented tragedies. In California, a study showed that a California red flag law has assisted in the prevention of 21 mass shootings between 2016 and 2018. Florida, since passing a red flag law in 2018, there have been notable cases of the law intervening in multiple cases of potential violence.
And that's the thing, folks, if your argument is so strong, if you are so righteous, like we see these Democrats are always, then why is it when you are confronted with a very simple question or a very simple point like, but what about Chicago, you become a stuttering mess? I wasn't ready for that question. How? How are you not ready for the obvious question? I mean, it's basically the main talking point on the right wing, that if gun laws are so effective, why are the most violent places in America the ones with the strictest gun laws? And the response is absolutely spectacular, as clearly she was totally unprepared. She goes into red flag laws. What does that have to do with anything? I mean, the framing of Peter Doocy's question couldn't be more clear. All of the legislation that Democrats are proposing seems to target and restrict legal gun owners. But what about Chicago, where all of the violent acts and violent crimes, which are constant and occurring throughout the year non-stop, especially on the weekends, well, they're all happening with illegal firearms. Well, all of those weapons were purchased illegally on the black market. She literally responded to, well, what about Chicago, with red flag laws. Somehow, increased regulation on legal firearm sales, creating a red flag database, is going to reduce violence with illegal arms in Chicago? How utterly ridiculous. This woman is not prepared. And what it really was a shift. Democrats don't want to confront the ugly reality of their own policies and policy failures. So she does a clear shift and sticks to the messaging of red flag laws have been proven to blah blah blah. Again, you're not tackling the issue. You literally didn't answer the question because you have no answer. Democrats with their sweeping legislation going after people's constitutional rights and frankly going after their political opponents is the reality of it is an oversimplification. You have a delicate problem and Democrats are just taking a hammer to it, smashing it and thinking that they're solving the problem, but really all they've done is disfigure it. They go to the immediate, simplest solution thinking that it's going to solve the problem, but it never does. And when questioned on their utter hypocrisy and their utter failure, they don't have the answers, and in many cases, they don't feel like they owe you answers. But man, this Karine Jean-Pierre figure is truly out of her depths on this one. And again, it boils down to the same thing. This is why Democrats avoid debates. Karine Jean-Pierre is in a very serious position right now where she's going to face real scrutiny if she just resorts to her old ways. Of course, we've mentioned and covered this before that Karine Jean-Pierre has essentially made a career of labeling things that she doesn't like or people that she doesn't like or networks that she doesn't like as racist.
Racism, sexism, misogyny, all of that, homophobia, xenophobia, we connected to Donald Trump. Fox News was racist before coronavirus. They are racist during the coronavirus. Fox News will be racist after the coronavirus.
Walks like a racist, talks like a racist, acts like a racist. It is a racist. And we have a racist president in the White House.
Birtherism, which is inherently racist. They want to put up these awful voter registration, voter suppression laws, which is racism.
Everything I don't like, everything I disagree with is racism. Well, in this case, if she was on MSNBC and somebody said, well, what about the gun violence in Chicago? What she would probably respond with is, that's a racist dog whistle. How dare you? But in a serious position as the White House press secretary, she can't exactly resort to her old ways. She can't exactly default to her go-to response when representing the White House. And so clearly she is falling apart. And really, even the press corps at large seems to think it's amateur hour when dealing with Mrs. Karine Jean-Pierre. I mean, they're fed up. It's not just Peter Doocy. A day or two ago, the press corps was going after her relentlessly for all the dishonesty when it comes to White House communications in relation to the baby formula crisis.
To say there is no specific person is not a satisfactory answer. When you have senior assistants to the president, there's a paper trail, I'm sure, about briefings to the president. There's a domestic policy council. There's a chief of staff. At some point, we need to know who would have been the most likely person to talk to him. I think it's evasive to not have the most senior people in the White House willing to say, I had a conversation with the president about it, or we talked about it in this context or that context. And we're also all reporting on the consumer side of it, of what you're doing, putting out and trying to get information. But we're also trying to understand the information flow in this White House, and it's important for us to get that answer, which is why we're going to keep asking it until we get that answer.
That matters.
Take it down a level from him
into
the staff of the White House. And part of the reason there's so much curiosity about this across town is because, as you know, there have been stories written over the last several days and weeks about how things are going here in the West Wing, how things are operating. And so when we ask who was told, either by the FDA or the Department of Health and Human Services or the USDA here in the West Wing, who was told first? How did that get from that person eventually to the president? As completely understandable. There are thousands of things going on across the federal government
There
today.
are thousands of things. We were just talking about gun violence.
Something else could prop up suddenly as an unforeseen crisis, like this one. And so we're trying to get a sense of how do things operate here inside the West Wing and how they eventually rise to the level of presidential involvement that then lead to things like invoking the Defense Production Act 4 or 5 months after the initial flags were raised.
I mean, she is just getting hammered in there. I honestly, to a certain extent, kind of feel bad, but at the same time, she knew what job she was applying for. And honestly, I doubt she really cares, so why would I care if she doesn't? And actually, speaking about the facts of this whole baby formula discussion that people are having right now, once again, the Biden administration is being outed as utterly dishonest. We've heard since the start that Joe Biden has been on this issue since the beginning. Well, now it seems like Joe's trying to take a step back and avoid any culpability or responsibility. Biden says he heard late about baby formula shortage. Then Biden concedes that he didn't understand how big an effect Abbott plant shutdown would have on baby formula. Biden says he wasn't alerted to baby formula shortage until April. Companies, quote, knew from the beginning. And so the reason why people are pressing the White House secretary so hard on this is to get answers on when Joe Biden was informed about this impending baby formula crisis, to see if the statement is true that Joe Biden only learned about it in April, or was he aware before and just chose not to act? Was he briefed on his government shutting down the Abbott plant and the possible effects that would have, and they just moved on to the next thing, and didn't take this possibility of a major lack of supply and supply chain disruptions seriously enough? And then fast forward months later, babies are literally starving and women cannot get baby formula in certain areas. Well, we've been tracking this White House, and let me tell you, if the White House press secretary is avoiding this at all costs and getting pressed hard by the White House press corps, well then you know what, they're probably being pretty dishonest and they're trying to hide something, is just what I could assume, given their previous behavior in similar situations. Just awful across the board. An absolutely terrible start for Mrs. Karine Jean-Pierre. And just like her boss Joe Biden, if this is her first report card, she is getting F's basically across the board. An utter disgrace, a total failure, looking like a deer caught in the headlights, totally unqualified for the job. And it's a trend that we are seeing across the White House. That's what I got for you guys though. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, a comment, subscribe, share it as much as possible. I'm gonna get back to work. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.